Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology. And astrology is a fascinating subject, especially when in light of what we see in the world stage. And when we see events happen on the world stage and then we see them reflected in the charts, we know that there's a certain reason for things happening. In some ways, it gives us a sense of comfort or nervousness, no matter how you look at it. But either way, it is validating, and it's always important to think of that. I've got a great guest coming on in a minute. I want to remind you, first of all, about my weekly newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, you'll find a brief overview of the mundane aspects happening on the planet for the week ahead, and then I break it out into individual signs. I encourage you to read your sun sign and your rising sign, both. If you don't know your rising sign, that's the time of birth when you were born. You can find a rising sign calculator on my website, turningofthewheel.com or chrisflisher.com. Enter your time of birth there and you'll get your rising sign. You read those two together for any week or any period of time, you're going to get much more accuracy about what's happening in your chart or in your life for the week to come. Anyway, that goes out every Sunday. You can get that. It's on Constant Contact. You can find out about that from my website. So, without any further ado, let's get my guest on. My guest is Dorothy Oja, and she is a astrologer from around where I live, and I've known her for several years, and we've brushed shoulders here and there at the conferences and stuff like that, and I've always wanted to have her on the show today, so it's great to have her on. Her website is planetweather.net. And it's great to have her on today. We're going to be talking about the election debrief, which she has just been talking about recently, so I thought it'd be a fascinating topic for all of us. Welcome to the show, Dorothy. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Chris, for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and talk about my favorite subject.
Yeah, nothing like this. So the election debrief is a fascinating topic, I think, and really relevant, obviously, given what we've just witnessed. We have been enduring a rather unusual election cycle here with results that have never been seen before, and it's a bit disconcerting. It certainly plays to the Saturn-Neptune square we endured all through the election cycle, and I'm curious as to where you're looking at this and how you're coming up at this topic.
All right. Well, this was a class that I did. A lot of my students really wanted to look at this because, because really, Chris, all of the experts were wrong, and it is just so that is incredibly disconcerting. Right? How could all the experts have been wrong? So I've been thinking a lot about that, and that includes 12 astrologers at a recent conference in California. 6 international and 6 domestic all predicted a Hillary Clinton win, and all of the experts, the statisticians, non-astrologers, also all predicted a Hillary win. Okay, so what went wrong? That's what we wanted to look at in my class. What did we miss? All right, so it's very complex. It's not, it's not just one thing. But you mentioned the Saturn-Neptune square. I think that certainly was key in that what that spoke to was the fake news phenomena.
Yep.
That was so it just ratcheted up this past year more than ever before. And of course, with Twitter and the internet, it just explodes and it goes viral instantly. Mm-hmm. And the decay, there's I think of Saturn Neptune as some kind of a decay in the system or a deception in the system.
Deception, I see deception.
Yeah, so the Russian hacking,
mm-hmm.
And we don't even know the full story of that yet. But, this is like a breach in the system. Neptune Saturn, right?
Yeah, it is, and I thought it was very interesting because I always tried to put the characters on the individual planets. So I thought of Hillary Clinton as being Saturn, and I thought of Donald Trump as being Neptune. And so I thought, well, they're in a square. It's obvious. There's a lot of contention here. But I always I always favored Saturn to win because that's the responsible planet. That's what I was thinking. I thought, well, we're obviously going to err on the side of Saturn because it's more responsible. It's going to lead us where we need to be. That was my thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way to put it, and then there's also the Jupiter-Pluto square that
Right.
was applying on the day of the election, right?
Right.
So, so that would be, a real stimulus. And Pluto has been there for a long time, since 2008, and Jupiter now is coming to square it. That's how I look at it.
Right. Yeah.
Jupiter stimulating what has already been working in the Pluto Capricorn
Cycle, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's to me sounds like an over the top character, Jupiter Libra. So that could also describe a system that is really getting overblown. Something in the system is getting overblown, enlarged. We're looking at a system that perhaps has been too ponderous. Pluto's now at the 15th degree, also right in the middle of the sign.
Right.
So I think, as much as many of us, are really very nervous about Trump, he probably is an agent of change. He is an agent of change, and he may wind up shedding light on some things that do need to change. We're not going to like everything, certainly. I mean, there are a lot of things that are very scary that he's doing. But we also have to look at that other side, that there's a reason that he's here now. And I'm trying to find a reason, trying to find something that's positive about the situation.
I know, we're all desperately trying to find that. And that is the irony of it all. I mean, I do believe that he is an agent of change. I think that the word change was the most effective word for this current election. We've been, after the past 8 years with the obstruction in Congress and the House and everything else, and all of the things that have been stalled at the hands of the Congress, Supreme Court justices and everything else, it seems as if we needed a change. And it's not uncommon for parties to change like this every 8 years. That's not uncommon at all. What's uncommon is that the person who took the role is what's uncommon. This is a man with no background whatsoever.
Yes, he has no experience. This is one of the things that we talked about earlier in my classes with my students is most of us, when we're applying for a job, we have to have a resume, we have to have interviews, we have to be able to demonstrate that we have the qualifications for the job that we're applying for, right?
Right. Very, very important. And usually you go through like a battery of people to do that. You don't just have one. You go through a whole series of people in the interview process.
And this is the most important job in the world. This is the leader of the free world.
I know, and there's no real revelations about income taxes or any of that stuff that you think had to be. And it's almost as if we are being, the wool is being pulled over our eye. That's what I feel like, because I'm wondering, why aren't people more diligent in getting this information? If they can hack into in Hillary's email, why can't they hack in to get Donald Trump's IRS reports? Or else they have got them and they're not releasing them on purpose.
Well, that's what's been reported is that the Russians hacked into the RNC as well, but did not release any of that because they wanted to slant the election to Trump.
Right.
So who knows what they have, that they're not releasing, but there's evidence that they hacked into both.
Yeah, I know that, and that's the fact that it's one-sided like that is very disturbing. The fact that his income taxes are not out there, I'm sure somebody can find the income taxes. I just find it hard to believe that they can't get that. I am convinced, without a doubt, and I have nothing to base this on, but I'm sure that there is something hiding there that he does not want us to see. And it could, and then, what may happen, as you said earlier, 12 astrologers did not predict this. I know one Vedic astrologer that did predict this, but aside from that, the fact that this may not he may very well come to a fork in the road where he does not end up being president.
Yes, that's very possible. That's very possible. And the other thing that we looked at is why were astrologers so wrong? One of the things that we look at in mundane is what's going on with the moon, right? The moon is the will of the people in mundane. And Hillary is now up to almost 3 million in the popular vote. So, in a sense, the will of the people was for Hillary. It's just that we have this system of the Electoral College, and there is something to be said about that. Do you know what I mean?
Of course, yeah, no,
yeah.
absolutely, and and then what I think is even more ironic, especially through the lens of astrology, is that the Electoral College meets on the 19th when Mercury goes retrograde. So does that offer up the idea of a recount, a reevaluation, a reconsideration of what we know? That's how
I think it's unlikely that it will happen. Also Mars changes signs on that day.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had Mars in Aquarius since the early hours of November 9th. So now it switches, and the inauguration will be with Mars in Pisces. So on the 19th, both of those things happen at the same time. So one thing I've heard is that 10 electors are asking for more detailed information on the Russian hacking.
Oh.
But according to law, I think it's 32 electors have to refuse to confirm the person who was elected. Otherwise, it goes forward, and Trump will be confirmed. So that would be. I don't think it's ever happened in the U.S.
Oh no, I don't think it has either. And that would be. But this is an unprecedented situation with an unprecedented candidate entering into unconventional times. So unconventional times require unconventional tactics, I believe.
Yes, and we'll see. I think that we're getting more and more surprises here. I mean, there are too many connections to Russia all throughout Trump's campaign, and his former campaign manager, now the Secretary of State that he's chosen, the Exxon Oil CEO. Who it's just very troubling. It's very troubling.
It's so obvious. I mean, it seems to me to be so obvious that this is some very bad malfeasance going on here. I find it to be unreasonable that they are even at this stage where they're just discussing. I suppose they've got to act on facts, and this is a major decision, but it seems to me to be so obvious with all the appointees he's putting in there, overturning the EPA, overturning just about everything, and heading in a direction that seems very, very dangerous.
It is very dangerous. And that brings us to the upcoming Jupiter, the first of 3 Jupiter opposite Uranus that we're having.
Right. And I wonder what that would spell for it. I mean, it does go across the 10th house of the United States. It comes across the U.S.'s Saturn is involved in that mix. And so it does bode for it could bode for a revolution of a major kind. It could be a major upset.
Right. So Uranus has been there since 2010, right? Uranus went into Aries.
Yeah. Well, I think it was right. Yep.
Yeah.
March 11th, right. I think.
Yeah, right at the end of May. Yeah, 2010. So here now Jupiter comes along. We're at the full moon point in the synodic cycle between these two planets. So a lot more is going to be revealed. That's kind of the short description of Jupiter opposite Uranus, or any opposition. It's full moon. Everything is revealed. Mm-hmm. And in those signs, of course, we're talking a lot about relationships, of course, changes in relationships, changes in alliances, upsets, people kind of jockeying around to reposition themselves based on, very erratic circumstances or unusual or unprecedented circumstances. And people are trying to, find their balance again. So that would be one way to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that does make sense in some ways. I mean, I also think that the idea of a revelation of some sort that is radically different, sort of I always think of Uranus as like out of the blue bolt, sort of these flashes. Even though it's a slow-moving planet, it does deliver oftentimes startling revelations. I could almost see this being where something is released. The smoking gun, as they say in the punditries, the smoking gun gets revealed, and something is really clearly shown to be out of order that casts things in the other direction. I mean, that may just me being hopeful, or naive in that regard. But I do see that as perhaps a unlikely. And of course, with Jupiter there, it's a very big thing. It's inflated.
Yes. Yes, and we're going to have three of those. That's going to be one of the dominant themes of 2017, because the next one is in March 3rd, and the last one is September 28th, 2017. Mm-hmm. So they're happening. The first one this month is at 20 Libra, the next one at 22 Libra, and the last one at 27 Libra. So if any of your listeners have any placements in those degrees, of course, you're going to feel that, that shift in relationships, a shift in relationships, but also values. Jupiter and Libra being values, that we are really, as a country, I think, trying to redefine what our values are. What is most important? What do we ignore in favor of something else?
Well, we have a division there as well. That's the problem.
Yes.
We have a division. We are divided in that regard, which is really disconcerting because it's such a polarized nation right now.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think it's been polarized, but those people who have not had a voice. Donald Trump has given some of these factions, unfortunately, some of the very negative factions, a lot of voice. And they feel emboldened now to say things that are racist and bigoted. Their hate crimes have gone up, by an incredible percentage, since his election, and even during his election.
It's campaign. Very disconcerting. And I keep coming back to that time. I think of Mars entering into Aquarius as I always think of Aquarius as the sort of the humanitarian, as we all do, humanitarian sort of global view of the world. And I'm thinking that with Mars there, we might be looking at a shift, the thing is that because we're so hampered right now by all of this confusion, I think our tendency is to err on the side of fear when it might also be something that we actually need to have happen. Like there's been a lot of talk about, the corruption going on in Washington and all that. And even though much of what we're looking at now with appointments appears to be a continuation of the corruption in some ways, it might very well be something that sets a new course. I don't know. I'm just trying to find the silver lining here.
Right. Well, again, going back to the opposition, which will be prevalent in 2017, is what I've heard from many people after this election, and also what I have decided to do, is to be extra vigilant.
Yes.
That we can't go to sleep. We can't take things for granted anymore, because if we do, then we have chaos. So being vigilant, really being critical, and really watching. And this long Mercury in Capricorn is also part of this dynamic. Mercury's going to be in Capricorn until early February. So that is very critical factors, really looking at everything very carefully and taking action. These are cardinal signs. Everyone has to be active. Everyone has to search for, is this fake news? Who is putting this information out? What is their agenda? What's their motive? Are they credible? We can't be asleep, and we can't take for granted. We all have to be more responsible, personally responsible.
Right, I know, but how do you get that message across, and how do people decide that on a global level when so much is just as you say, it's all fake? How do we find a way around that? That is almost impossible.
Well, all we can do is, first of all, understand, some of the people that voted for Trump are not bigots. They're not racists. It's much more complex than that. It's easy to say, these people are all racist, etc. It's not true. It's just not true. I know some of them. And so do you, and so do we all. I think it's understanding. It's looking at, another factor that played into this election, which is elitism.
Right.
Thinking that simply because we're better educated or because we use bigger words that we might be better than other people who live on a farm and are in the heartland, or are poor. We have to look at our own flaws in this situation. I think we were all co-creators of what happened here. We weren't paying attention. We were in our own little bubble.
Yeah, we were, and I definitely got that impression when I was listening to Hillary speak. I got the impression that there was a sense of elitism there, which is, I think, picked up by many people, especially some of her comments that she made over the course of the election cycle that led people to that. The basket of deplorables was an unfortunate thing to say.
That was very unfortunate, yeah.
But it sort of showed her hand. But there's also was a very imbalanced mode there. But I think that for anyone to think that this man who's been out to serve himself since the day he was born, basically,
yeah.
is about to come back and be our savior is
right.
is ludicrous. I think that's the biggest misnomer of all. I mean, that's just not going to happen, and I can't see it.
Right. Well, see, this is the Achilles heel of the USA chart, what I call the Achilles heel, which is a Mars-Neptune applying square. Mm-hmm. It's our fascination with celebrity. It's our adoration of the glitz, the glamour, the money, the things that maybe we would want, but we can't get. And these amazing people have these amazing homes and amazing lives. And maybe if we get close to them somehow, some of that will rub off on us. There is something about that in the USA culture. There really is.
Yeah, no, that's a very good observation, too, I think, because it is incredibly accurate. We tend to more than any other country in the world, we tend to romanticize all of these characters, and this is sort of the classic American archetype in some ways. Is the big Cadillac, the Hollywood stars, yes, and all that stuff. It just fits right in with us, and it really, because we are the largest social experiment on the planet. I mean, the United States really is the truest melting pot, and for that to be sort of our the line that we strive to is really disturbing in some ways, because it's such a phony thing. And yet the irony of it all is clear as day, and that may be the lesson we learn from this, that start being more earthbound, start being more, maybe that's what the Pluto in Capricorn is trying to tell us, is that be more earthbound, reconstruct yourselves and be more pragmatic, focus on the land, focus on more of our personal values and beliefs rather than these, this fleeting glimpse of fame that we're so immersed with.
Right. And going back to something that you said earlier, Chris, is like that we think that this one person out there, in this case, Donald Trump, is going to solve all our problems. This is abdicating personal responsibility, which I think Uranus and Aries and that opposition with Jupiter and Libra it's one of the messages of that opposition. It's like, okay, yes, we need to be in partnership. We want to be in partnership, but how much of your personal responsibility do you give up in relationships? Mm-hmm. Or in this case, you're putting all of your faith in this one person who you think is going to bring your coal job back or something, or manufacturing jobs back. It's just, people look for simplistic solutions when the world is so complex, and you, as a president, you can't always go for the best solution. You have to compromise. You have to learn how to compromise, which is also part of an opposition of
there's a real sense of impulsivity there, where people just want a quick fix. They just want to take care of it, and so they can go back to their daily lives. But I think that is an interesting observation as well, because of this tendency towards this capacity for this quick fix, and it's also part of the reason why astrology is so misunderstood as well, is that people don't want to spend the time to really delve into it. It's a lot of work to figure it out.
That's right. Exactly. So the USA chart, we are in our Pluto return cycle, which only can happen to countries. It can never, of course, happen to a person, because it's a 240-year cycle. That it takes that long for it to go through all the signs and come back to where it started.
And we haven't quite hit that yet, but it looks like if this were to come on, if this election is to hold, and if Trump gets elected again, which God forbid, but it could happen, then that would bring us to the direct return of Pluto in 2020 or 2022, which would be in the middle of that. And I do believe that the Pluto return is an interesting data point because it really is about a reconstruction. And I think that we have long been overdue for reconstruction. We have needed to reconstruct in some way, just that the situation hasn't arisen yet. But this may be what we're going to be witnessing here. This may very well be his raison d'etre, you know?
Yes. I mean, because not not everything that he has said is entirely wrong. It's just how he says it and how he wants to do it. You know, it certainly is the need for change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what's interesting is that the progressed chart of the USA has Pluto at 29 Capricorn, and that's where Mars was on the day of the election. 29
Wow.
Capricorn.
Yeah, very good.
So that's also a very, very interesting thing, you know, that, again, you know, it was going to be someone who was going to really break the system apart or really, and I guess Hillary wasn't the one to do that.
Well, no, and I think that speaks to that sense of elitism that we were talking about, which in many ways was what Bernie was talking about. He was worried about that. I think he was also a revolutionary in that regard. I think he would have done very well had he been chosen. I think that one of the things that Trump, I think, brought to the table, as you say, he does say things that are correct. I think there's some things he says that are correct. I think it's the way he says it. He speaks in very short, clipped phrases that are easily digested.
Yes.
Easily tweeted, as we well know. And
yes.
As a result of that actually gets to the people. People don't want to spend the time trying to parse through long, complicated policy. They just don't want to.
Yes. So part of that is elitism, okay? But another part is a basic laziness in the culture.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah, that is exactly right. That makes perfect sense. We're talking today with Dorothy Oja, and she is an astrologer out of Massachusetts, and we're talking today about sort of an election debrief, which is a great topic. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to continue our discussion about what we're witnessing, perhaps where it might go. How did astrology perhaps not see this? But there's many things about this that do make sense when we look at it. So we'll be back in about a minute or two. Hang in there. But meanwhile, Dorothy's website is planetweather.net. So it's just one long word, planetweather.net. She's also on Twitter and Facebook. She does a daily Planet Weather News, which is a blog. And what's that address again for that one, Dorothy?
That's Facebook, Planet Weather News on Facebook.
Planet Weather News. You can check that out while we're taking a break. We'll be right back, and we'll continue our discussion, so hang in there. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color. Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. My guest today is Dorothy Oja, and her website is planetweather.net. She also does a Facebook and Twitter feed, the Planet Weather News, which is a blog on Facebook that you can get to. And she's a fascinating, interesting astrologer and someone I've known for a while in crossing various paths that we converge on. And we're talking today about the election debrief because many people are so... not only deeply disappointed, but deeply concerned and confused about what's going on. We are not seeing the normal transition of power here, which is a little bit disconcerting because it makes us, in some ways, it makes us vulnerable, I think. When there isn't stability at the top of the government, the rest of the populace becomes somewhat at risk, I think. I think that's safe to say, don't you? Aren't we somewhat in a risky spot right now?
Yes, well, very nervous. Yes, because we don't know, because he's a loose cannon, basically.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we talked about in the debrief with my students was something that we felt that we missed. You know, when we look at any natal chart, we want to see what energies are repeated or are more dominant in the chart. So in Trump's chart, he's very Jupiterian, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the themes. I mean, there are other themes as well, a Martian theme and a Mercury theme, but we focused on the Jupiter theme, okay? His moon in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, and his most exact aspect in his chart is a Jupiter trine Uranus.
Yeah,
it's exact.
Incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, so we put a lot of emphasis on the exact aspect in the chart. And so then he's in his Jupiter return cycle.
Yeah, and
right?
Mars on the ascendant as well, which is a very powerful component of who he is.
Right, but he's in his Jupiter return. So if you're already a Jupiterian type and you get a Jupiter return, then that is going to be even stronger and luckier for you. And I think that we minimized that for him.
Yeah, I do too. It's a very strong component of him, and it happens, you know, it's coming up on when he turns 72, he'll have his exact Jupiter return. He'll be in office then. It's not that far off. It's very likely that we could see that, but he's going to have Saturn.
He's having it now, Chris. Jupiter's Libra now.
Right. No, it is. It's very close. But I'm saying it's 18 to 17 is what I have. 18 degrees to 17 degrees. So it's very close. Yeah. And of course, he's going to be walking down Pennsylvania Avenue or whatever in the grandest of all grandstands you can possibly imagine.
Oh my. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah. So that was one of the things we looked at, is because when we were talking before the election in my classes, we were talking about, well, he's having his Jupiter return, and for those who don't know, a Jupiter return happens every 12 years in every person's chart or every country's chart. It takes Jupiter 12 years to go through the 12 signs, one per year. And we were saying, oh, well, you know, even if he doesn't win the election, you know, he'll get a TV show. He'll have a,
right.
He'll have a, he's always doing something grand. He always wants to do something grand. So we kind of minimized that, but that was a key influence for him in this election, which it's a big boost, and it's not something that Hillary had. She didn't have anything equal. And of course, the other thing was that we didn't have Hillary's correct time. So we
No.
were really hampered by that.
Yeah, that's a big thing. That gets
Yeah.
back to the accuracy of people listening. When you talk about the rising sign, it's incredible to know that piece of data because
Yeah.
it shifts the whole chart. That's why it's important to follow that. But he's a incredibly charismatic, almost in a world of his own, a world of his own design. Very,
Yes.
very unusual man. I was reading something this today in the New York Times by Al Franken, who's a senator from Minnesota. He used to be a former comedian, and
Right.
his comment was that he's never seen him. He's never in his entire life ever seen Trump laugh, and that is a real character indicator because he may smile, but he doesn't really ever laugh. He doesn't really ever have
That's
those.
so interesting.
Yeah, and I think that I'm sure Al Franken has got a lot more visibility into that than we do. But it was as I thought about it, you really don't ever see him. You see him smiling, but you don't ever see him really laughing, and that's
Well, that's really, really interesting, Chris. I'm trying to think back, and I don't think I ever remember seeing him laugh either. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that is I think he's damaged goods is what I think it is, and he has he's sort of psychologically built a walls around himself to shield himself from some deep inner conflicts. I think.
Yes.
And this is just part of it.
Venus-Saturn conjunction in Cancer.
Yeah, very, very difficult. Almost, and I hear that he was almost unloved in some way, or at least perhaps ignored because his father was so consumed with his own business dealings that he just sort of patted him on the head and said, and sent him off to boarding school and stuff like that. So there may have been a real lack of love there that sort of made him put this armor around him and just sort of build this persona that he's been walking with ever since he's been born. So
Yeah, that's a real possibility. Yeah.
but it is disconcerting when we look at when we go to the inauguration day, January 20th, and we look at where the aspects are for that day for him. We see a lot of interesting stuff. We're going to see he's got Saturn on his moon. He's going to have Saturn on his moon. That's going to be a difficult and I think that's actually very appropriate as well because this is a guy I don't think who really wants all the responsibility that's being handed to him. He doesn't want the daily briefs. He doesn't have the attention span for that. So I can't imagine him really enjoying this. I mean, it's a great honor. It's a great thing to have on your resume, as we said.
He wants the honor and the adulation. That's what he wants.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to go through the hard work to get it. And that's where this really is going to come in because I've always thought to myself, I said, gosh, why would anybody want this job of all jobs?
Yeah.
Why did he just go to the beach or go out and buy a yacht and go sailing or have fun? I mean, he's 70 years old. But obviously he's got an inner drive that's pulling him this way.
Right. So notice also that there are a couple of 17-degree planets on the inauguration day. Venus is at 17 Pisces, sextile Pluto at 17 Capricorn, which hooks very intimately into his Jupiter trine Uranus. They're both 17.
Of them. Yeah.
So Pluto is squaring his Jupiter exactly on that day.
Yeah, and Venus is squaring his Uranus.
Yes.
So that does provide him with a certain sense of. I mean, he was born on an eclipse. I mean, he's a powerful figure. We have been waiting for a king of some sort. We just didn't know what the king would look like. Perhaps maybe we were looking for a savior. I was looking for something else, but I also have a firm belief that we sort of have to go through this pendulum swing in order to be awoken. We have to be awoken. And getting back to your comments about being vigilant, this really is a call for us to be really vigilant, perhaps in ways that we haven't. And that's really what's I think that's really perhaps the lesson here. It's like, be careful what you wish for. You wanted a new king, or you needed a new king. You got a new king. He may not be the one you expected, but he's going to shake up the show for sure.
Oh, yes, he is. Yeah, that whole cluster of planets in Pisces, is troubling because that's, Pisces can be very inspirational, but there's also a lot of confusion and deception that is embedded in that sign. those are the negatives. Every sign has positives and negatives.
Of course,
so,
yeah. But he thrives on that sort of confusion factor. I mean, remember
Yes.
during the third debate, he said that he said, I'll wait until I see the results if I decide I'm going to concede or not.
Yes.
That was very much of a control issue, number one, but also very much of a trying to muddy the waters by saying,
Yes.
I'll keep you in suspense. That's
Yes.
his exact words, I'll keep you in suspense. Very Neptunian characteristic of this fog of illusion, this confusion factor. The more
Yep.
things are stirred up, the more. And of course, there's a Vladimir Putin himself somebody mentioned to him that the best way to fool the crowd is just to keep lying, and eventually the people will believe what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably the most troubling thing coming from a president-elect, the constant lying and the skewing of facts that goes out to millions of his Twitter followers. It's just, I mean, the media has a lot of work to do. I mean, they've fallen down on that job. They got a little bit better toward the end, but they did not do a good job. They have a lot of blame in this as well.
Oh, I agree. And many people let him slide when he clearly lied to them. He just let them slide. I mean, the press let him slide. But the other day, I know that there are people who have been asking him repeatedly, and if not him, perhaps Mike Pence or other people in his cabinet, questions over and over again, and they're always getting nebulous answers. But they're now finally holding their feet to the fire, saying, "Hey, listen, we need to get some solid answers here. I haven't gotten an answer yet." So I have seen that change, but as you say, maybe it's too late.
Yeah. The other thing that he kept saying, I forgot who mentioned this, but I thought it was a very good point. He kept saying, "Make America great again, make America great again." No one ever asked him, well, what do you actually mean by that?
I know.
No one ever asked him.
He was just selling a pipe dream idea of going back to the 1950s when we had prosperity, but we know we can't go backwards, and we're not going to. The reason the jobs are not in the United States has got nothing to do with the United States per se. It has to do with mechanization, globalization, robotization, the hindrances of basically inherent in capitalism of always having to create newer, faster, cheaper, better. All of those are components. You're not going to go back and open up coal mines. They already have steel mills in the United States that are run by robots, and we're still producing the same amount of steel as we ever did. It's just that it's done by robots instead of humans. So how are you going to turn that corner?
Right. So he was tapping into a nostalgia that is no longer, and also tapping into the fear of those people who think life is going so fast, which it is,
right,
and having trouble keeping up with it or understanding it or being able to position themselves in this brave new world that we're in. I mean, it's scary for a lot of people.
It is, very much so. And I think he must have tapped into an older generation. I think if the millennials had come out in full force, perhaps things would have been different. I think a lot of them were upset and may even have gone the other way simply because of the fact that Bernie didn't get there. They were, I had spent a lot of time talking to my children about which way to go, and I think they did the right thing. But I know that there probably are others who voted their consciences in ways of revolt or rebellion.
Yes.
So,
yes.
The only thing I can say that somehow makes me, and this is my only is comforting in some way, but also a concern. And that is that I believe the country has enough checks and balances in it in order to, weather a storm such as this. I think that there's enough there. My only concern is if it is used, if they are willing to step up. Are people willing to step up, or are they just going to roll over and let this take us away? That's my biggest concern.
Right, and I think it should be, but I feel, I can speak for myself and others, people have been very depressed. I mean, I live in Massachusetts, and so do you, so this is a very liberal, progressive state. There was a pall over the state, after...
it was noticeable. It was noticeable.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
you can feel it in the air.
You really could. I think, and I also think that we were, in some ways... we were misled by the very things that we thought we could depend upon. I, for one, look at the New York Times every day religiously, and every day throughout the election cycle, there was a graph at the bottom of the page that said, yep, she's up 70, 80 points. And even when the scandals hit, they still showed her miles and miles ahead of him. And that was a complete inaccuracy that I'm sure misled people.
Yes, it did. And then of course there's one more thing that I think really affected the election, which hasn't been talked about enough, and that was the Comey letter.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was just the nail in the coffin. Because it brought everything 11 days before the election, brought everything back to the ridiculous, email thing, which was totally overblown to begin with. But it brought everything back, and it tapped into all the fake news that had been produced about that, and put everyone's attention right back on that. And that man should be fired. It was definitely partisan. It's just
Yeah,
a terrible, egregious act.
it's really maddening because people who may have been on the fence to that point in time that would be enough to sway them the other direction, and they just went in there. And I think a lot of people were, because the voting booth provides privacy.
Yes.
I think that they may have gone in and voted the way that other people maybe didn't think they were voting. They may have voted opposite of what their friends thought, just because they were so upset or confused or disillusioned by all of this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they did, and then they didn't know what to believe, what was true, and it was, very confusing. And that was just the final thing that turned some of the undecideds, I think. Yeah.
But what it really shows, it shows how divided this country is. I think that's probably one of the largest takeaways, is the fact that this country is so divided. And how do you, when I heard his concession speech, I mean not his acceptance speech on the evening of the election,
Right.
I thought I saw a glimmer of hope, to be honest.
Yeah.
Simply because he said we've got to get this together, and I thought, well, okay, let's give the guy a chance, and we do have to give the guy a chance. Let's be fair,
Yeah.
we have to give him that chance
true.
to say, okay, what can you do? Maybe you're a little unconventional, but maybe you've got an answer up your
Not a lot unconventional.
yeah, you're very unconventional, but maybe you've got a trick up your sleeve that we don't know about that will work. And I am certainly in favor of being on the good side of Russia rather than the bad side of Russia. I just don't know if this is the way to do it or not. But there are some things that are there. I thought that he might be, willing to. So we've got to give him a chance. I will say that, and I say that as a diehard liberal. We have to give him a chance. But I am, like I said, very concerned, and we have to decide, at some point in time, this does put the onus back on us as individuals. Will we? I mean, how many people didn't vote? Look at the number of people who didn't vote.
43 or 46% of the registered voters did not vote. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, and then what would that have been like had they voted? What would that have
Right.
been like? And why weren't they voting? Why did they?
Right.
They just don't care? Do they think it's irrelevant? I mean, now they're going to find out, and I think that's going to be one of the things that's probably the most revealing about it, is that many of the people who voted for him are probably the ones that are going to be the most impacted by changes that he makes. I believe that to be the case. So there may be a real buyer's remorse, similar to what happened in Britain with the Brexit.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see these changes happening like this. This really does seem to be a climatic swinging of the pendulum. But if if the roof did not leak, we would not fix it, right? So the roof is leaking now, so we've got to
Right.
fix it.
Yes, exactly. Now, there's one more thing about the election that I think also has really not been talked about, and that is misogyny.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I really do feel that also played a part in this election, which was that Mars at 29 Capricorn, that it was, we weren't willing to give this woman a chance.
Yeah.
Of course, there are more complex factors involved in that, but I think it's also a piece that has to be looked at, that is part of this complex, election cycle.
Yeah, I have a theory about some of that, and I was of the impression that when Barack Obama and Hillary were both running back in 2008, I saw that as a return of sorts of principles and ideas that were founded in the 60s, in the 1960s, sort of the flower child generation, of which I am one. And damn proud of it. Anyway, that time we were very much about civil rights. We were very much about feminism, and those two were the main themes that came out of the 1960s
Yes.
Vietnam era. And I thought, well, it makes sense that for Barack Obama to get the election. This is really a capitulation of those times come to fruition. We've elevated him to this spot. I thought, idealistically, that we've really overcome the racial divide, and I thought
Yes.
the same would happen with Hillary coming in
Yes.
right afterwards. And yet
Yes.
we don't have either. We have, and the most galling aspect of this is the fact that the person who beat her is a utmost misogynist.
Yes, exactly.
It's just
exactly.
insult
And
to
that's-
injury.
Yes, exactly. Rubbing salt into the wound, insult to injury, exactly. And so in the 60s there, in the middle of the 60s, we had the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in
Right.
Virgo.
In
And of
Virgo.
course, the last few years here, we've been living with the Uranus-Pluto square.
Right.
So
That's
there
why I
is
thought it was a return. I thought there would be a manifestation of that, and it
Yes.
seemed as if it played out well with Barack Obama getting there.
yes.
And it just
But it was an upset to that I think it's a going back to some kind of nostalgic times, as we talked about, that he tapped into this fear of globalization, this fear of newness, this fear of things going too fast, not being able to keep up, not knowing how to position yourself in a changing culture. He tapped into that, and that's his Venus conjunct Saturn. There's this conservative streak of wanting to create, a world for himself, a bubble for himself that is a Venus-Saturn insulated bubble. And he somehow was able to translate that to people who also feel that way, in their own lives.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because he comes from the same generation as Hillary. They're not, they are of the same time frame.
Right.
I am sure that he is not a very computer savvy person. I'm reasonably sure that. I don't know that for a fact, but I can't envision him, doing much except for Twitter. But that's a very simple tool.
For Twitter, yeah.
I can't really see him doing a whole lot. I think he delegates out and just sort of blows by these things and makes quick, rash decisions. So he is of a generation where he might like the return to this nostalgic period, but you have to wonder if his own time it was that nostalgic. Is he really longing to go back himself? I mean, maybe he's trying to find a youth he never had, a father he never had. I mean, there may be all kinds of topics like that are there, but we can't go back. We all know that.
Right. But that's the fantasy. That's what's in the USA chart, the Mars square Neptune, that we can easily be misled, even by our actions, even by the way that we go into wars. We get misled, and then we get into a quagmire. Then it goes off in all kinds of unexpected directions because we're not clear about why we're taking the action. We get misled easily.
Mm-hmm.
There is that piece of our culture.
And that does come down to laziness. I think you're right about that because I think that if we were more diligent in our news, in our own personal investigations, we would be far more, up in arms. I think we are far too lazy. Just the simple fact that 45 or whatever percent of the population didn't vote. That's half the country roughly that didn't vote. Half the country is just rolling over and saying, "Oh, yawn. Who cares? Whatever." It's
Right.
not going to affect my life. I'm still going to have my lights on in my house. Hopefully, you will.
Yeah.
You may not have a planet for your grandchildren, but
Yeah. That's the thing that's most disturbing to me is the apathy. That is the most disturbing about this whole thing, because if people were not that apathetic, if they were willing to dig below the sound bites a little bit and explore a little bit, we would have had a different outcome, I think. But that is so disturbing, apathy. And it goes across the board. It goes with Standing Rock. It goes with climate change. All kinds of things are happening. But I think for some people it's just overwhelming. I mean, it's overwhelming for me too, and for you too, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. It's very overwhelming. But I thought we were making such great progress. I mean, when I think of myself waking up on November, whatever it was, in 2008, and seeing that Barack Obama had won, I said, "My gosh,
Yes.
we've turned a corner. We're on
Yes.
our way. We are going to go."
Yes.
But that pendulum just comes back and haunts us.
Yeah. It came back, and the patriarchy basically said, "We're not done here yet." All these wonderful old white men up there.
Yeah.
Having it.
And so I wonder how much of that played into the role of, like when we look at this from an astrological standpoint, why so many of us were misled is perhaps certain it's probably the impact of the personality in astrology. I mean, there is a certain element. We all have our opinions, obviously. So
Yes.
we might look for the good aspects. We might look for that. But now here we are with buyer's remorse, perhaps, collectively looking back and looking at our charts and trying to make sense of this, sort of backing our way into astrology to make sense of all this. But
Yes.
maybe the facts were always there. We just chose not to abide by them.
Well, that's the other thing that we discussed, is that you can look at a certain aspect and you can expect that it may manifest in a different way. For instance, the strong Jupiter in Libra.
Yeah.
That's a Venus-Jupiter combination, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's about women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jupiter square Pluto. You know, that could be, you know, but what it turned out to be was electing someone who really had a very nasty side to him with regard to women. He views women as arm candy and as serving his masculinity. Not all of the rude things that he said about women. So it didn't turn out the way that we thought, but we can interpret. Every aspect can be interpreted in a multitude of ways. So
I know that is the conundrum, and that's one of the problems that we face as astrologers, is to how to determine what's the one signature that points us in one direction or the other, because it's always a dualistic reading. There's always a outcome that can go either way, I believe, because all planets have a good and a negative side to them, and how they aspect. I thought for sure that Saturn, as the archetype for Hillary Clinton, would have taken it over because of the fact that responsibility really is what rules us and is the guiding force to making life right. It's always about doing the right thing. And I thought Neptune, I mean, having him walk out on the stage in the Republican National Convention in a bank of fog, I said, oh my God, this is classic Neptune.
Yes.
It's classic Neptune.
Yes.
And it was just remarkable how crisp, and the optics, as they call it, were just right there. And yet, I said, how can people not see through this? And then to come out and say, I alone can fix this. It's like, this is like listening to The Wizard of Oz. Come on, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's very seductive. I mean, he has that seductive, charismatic ability to just, where he's speaking to the emotions and people are almost blotting out the actual words because.
Yeah. They want to hear what he's saying. Oh, you're fantastic. I think he's a marvelous guy. You're a wonderful person. You're the best. He cherry picks. He has a cachet of words he uses to make things, and either they are absolutely fabulous, a guy's a fabulous leader, or he's a disgusting pig. That's how he goes. He goes either way, which is very Gemini of him, which he is what he is.
Yep.
So, wow. Anyway, it's really interesting to talk about the subject. I mean, we could go on forever. Hopefully we've learned some lessons as a result of what this election has brought to us, and that may very well be yet to play out, and it may very well be that he doesn't make it all the way as far as we think, and therefore the astrology will bear up in the end as Saturn comes to our rescue. I don't know. But hopefully we'll see. We've been talking today with Dorothy Oja. She's an astrologer out of Massachusetts. Her website is planetweather.net. I encourage you to go there and get a reading from her if you'd like. And also, she has a blog called Planet Weather News, which is on Facebook. And on your Twitter and Facebook handles are Oja Dorothy. Is that right?
The Twitter is Oja Dorothy, and Facebook is Planet Weather News.
Planet Weather News. Okay, very good. And that comes out every day. So there's a wonderful opportunity to get some interesting news each day in your news feed, other than cat pictures and stuff like that. So anyway, so Dorothy, thanks so much for coming on today. It's been great talking with you. I really enjoyed it. It was a great conversation, and I'm licking my wounds with you, but hopefully we can find some silver in this lining somewhere.
I'm sure we can. Thank you, Chris, for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation.
Very good. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.